Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES horizon, watching the stars through the massive viewing window. 3 years they had traveled from Earth, looking for signs of intelligent life. Today that search was finally over. "Captain, we're getting signals," said Lieutenant Commander Ryan Blake from his station. "Multiple ships, unknown design. They're not responding to our standard greeting protocols." Jake felt his heart race. After decades of wondering if humans were alone in the universe, they had found someone. "Dr. Warren, are you ready for this?" Dr. Lisa Warren, the mission's lead scientist, nodded from her position near the communication array. She had spent her entire career studying the possibility of alien life. Now that moment was here, and she could barely contain her excitement. "Incoming transmission," Ryan announced. Wait, they're speaking English?" The main screen flickered to life, showing a tall, crystal-like being with multiple arms and what looked like eyes that shifted color from blue to purple. When it spoke, its voice was melodic but somehow nervous. "Greetings, travelers. I am Ambassador Krell 9 of the Zephyrian Collective. We did not expect to encounter your kind here." Jake stepped forward. "Ambassador, I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Horizon. This is humanity's first venture into deep space. We come in peace, seeking friendship and knowledge." The alien's crystalline face seemed to change expression, though it was hard to tell what that expression meant. "Humanity? From which world do you originate, Captain Morrison?" "Earth," Jake replied proudly. "The third planet from our sun in what we call the Sol system." The moment those words left his mouth, Jake noticed something strange. The alien's crystal body began to glow brighter, and there was a long pause before Krell 9 responded. Could you provide the galactic coordinates of this world?" Dr. Warren frowned. "That's an odd question. Why would they need coordinates if they speak our language?" Jake gave the coordinates anyway, reading them from their navigation system. As soon as he finished, Ambassador Krell 9's glow became almost blinding. "Please stand by," the alien said, and the transmission cut off. "What just happened?" Ryan asked, checking his instruments. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy spikes from their ships. It looks like they're powering up weapons." "Weapons?" Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "We just introduced ourselves. Why would they power up weapons?" Dr. Warren was studying the readings on her screen. "Captain, there are more ships coming." "A lot more. I'm counting at least 50 vessels of various designs." The communication system crackled back to life. Ambassador Krell 9 appeared again, but this time he wasn't alone. Behind him stood several other beings, each from a different species. Jake could see what looked like a floating jellyfish creature, something that appeared to be made of living metal, and a being that seemed to be composed entirely of swirling gas. "Captain Morrison," Krell 9 began, his voice now formal and careful, "we must ask you to follow our ships to the council station. There are matters that must be discussed." "What kind of matters?" Jake asked. "We're explorers, not soldiers. We've come seeking peaceful contact." "We understand," said the gas being in a voice like wind through leaves. "But your presence here requires immediate attention from the Galactic Council. Please comply and no harm will come to you." Ryan leaned over to Jake and whispered, "Captain, that sounded more like a threat than an invitation." Jake nodded but kept his expression calm. "Of course, Ambassador. We'll be happy to meet with your council. May I ask what this is about?" "All will be explained at the station," Krell 9 replied. "Please follow the escort ships. And, Captain, do not attempt to transmit any messages to your homeworld during the journey." The transmission ended again, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. "Sir," Ryan said quietly, "they're surrounding us. I count 63 ships now, all different designs. Some of them are massive." Dr. Warren looked up from her instruments, her face pale. "Captain, I'm picking up transmissions between the alien ships. I can't understand the languages, but the translation computer is picking up some words. They keep mentioning something about the return and verification protocols." "The return?" Jake repeated. "What could that mean?" "I don't know, but they seem very concerned about it," Lisa replied. "And there's something else. They're not calling Earth by the name you gave them. They're using some kind of code designation." Jake felt unease growing in his stomach. "What kind of designation?" "The computer can't translate it exactly, but it keeps coming up as something like Forbidden Origin Point or Quarantine World." "Quarantine World?" Ryan stood up from his station. "Captain, what if Earth has been to space before? What if this isn't really first contact? The idea seemed impossible, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Dr. Warren, is there any evidence in our history of previous space travel? Nothing in the official records, she said. But there are gaps in human history. Periods where civilizations just vanished without explanation. Sir, Ryan interrupted, the escort ships are moving. They want us to follow them now. Jake looked around at his crew. They had come to space looking for adventure and discovery. Instead, they had found aliens who seemed afraid of them, who knew about Earth but called it by another name, and who were treating them more like prisoners than guests. All right, Jake decided. We'll go with them. But everyone stay alert. Something tells me we're about to learn something about humanity that we never expected. As the Horizon followed the alien escort toward the Council station, Jake couldn't help but notice how the alien ships kept their weapons trained on his vessel. They weren't being welcomed to the galaxy. They were being brought in for questioning. Dr. Warren continued monitoring the alien communications, her frown deepening with each intercepted message. Captain, there's something else. The aliens keep referring to humans as them or they instead of you, when they think we're not listening. And they're using words that translate roughly to dangerous and extinction level. Jake stared out at the approaching station, a massive structure that seemed to be built from the combined technologies of dozens of different species. Soon they would have answers. But somehow he suspected those answers would change everything humans thought they knew about themselves and their place in the universe. The Council station was unlike anything the humans had ever imagined. As their ship docked, Admiral Susan Kane looked out at a structure that seemed to stretch forever in all directions. Massive towers twisted through space, connected by bridges that glowed with energy from a dozen different sources. This place must house millions of beings, whispered Dr. Peter Collins, the mission's expert on alien cultures. He had studied theoretical alien societies his entire career, but nothing had prepared him for this. Helen Foster, their diplomatic specialist, checked her translation device one more time. Remember, we're representing all of humanity here. Whatever happens, we stay calm and professional. They were escorted through corridors that seemed designed for creatures of every imaginable size and shape. The walls changed height and width as they walked, accommodating beings as small as house cats and others that towered 3 stories high. Admiral Kane noticed how other aliens reacted to their presence. Conversations stopped. Creatures stepped aside, pressing themselves against walls. Some even fled entirely when they saw the humans approaching. This isn't normal behavior for a peaceful first contact, Susan murmured to her team. Their escort, Ambassador Krell 9, led them to a vast chamber with a domed ceiling that showed the stars outside. The room was filled with beings from dozens of species, each more alien than the last. Floating creatures that looked like living clouds drifted near the ceiling. Beings made of what appeared to be living rock sat in specially designed seats. Others seemed to be pure energy, contained in crystalline forms. At the center of the chamber sat an ancient being that seemed to be made of pure thought itself. Its form shifted and changed as they watched, sometimes appearing solid, sometimes becoming transparent. When it spoke, its voice echoed directly in their minds. I am Council Prime Vrexka, the being announced. I have served as the voice of this council for 2,000 years. Never did I expect to face this day. Admiral Kane stepped forward. Council Prime, I'm Admiral Susan Kane of the United Earth Space Command. We're honored to address this assembly. Earth, Vrexka repeated, and the word seemed to cause a physical reaction throughout the chamber. Several aliens made sounds that could only be expressions of fear. You claim to come from the world your kind calls Earth. That's correct, Susan replied. We come seeking peaceful relations with the galactic community. Peaceful, said another council member, a being that looked like a giant insect. They claim to come in peace. Dr. Collins noticed the emphasis on the word claim and felt his stomach tighten. Something was very wrong here. Tell us, Vrexka continued, what is the current state of your homeworld? How many of your kind remain? Helen Foster frowned. There are approximately 8 billion humans on Earth. Our planet is thriving. We've recently achieved faster-than-light travel and decided to explore the galaxy. A wave of whispers spread through the assembly. Many of the aliens seemed shocked by this information. 8 billion, repeated a creature that looked like a living tree. So many survived. Survived what? Admiral Kane asked, her patience beginning to wear thin. What exactly are you talking about? Vrexka's form shifted, becoming more solid and somehow more intimidating. Admiral Kane, Your species presents us with a difficult situation. We had hoped never to encounter your kind again. Again? Dr. Collins stepped forward. Council Prime, I don't understand. This is humanity's first time in space. We've never left our solar system before. The chamber erupted in what could only be described as nervous laughter from dozens of different species. The sound was unsettling, like nothing the humans had ever heard. First time, wheezed a blob-like creature. They claim it's their first time. A young council member resembling a cross between a dolphin and a bird suddenly blurted out, "But they come from Graveworld Prime. How can they not know?" The chamber fell silent. The young alien's companions quickly surrounded him, making distressed sounds. Vrexka's form began to glow with what seemed like anger. "Silence," the Council Prime commanded. "That name is forbidden in open session." Admiral Kane felt her blood run cold. "Graveworld Prime? What is Graveworld Prime?" "You have said enough," Vrexka declared, looking at the young alien who had spoken. "This session will continue in closed chambers." "No," Susan said firmly. "We demand to know what's going on. What is this Graveworld Prime, and why do you seem to know more about humanity than we do?" Helen Foster watched as the various aliens exchanged glances. Fear was written clearly on every face, regardless of species. These weren't beings welcoming humanity to the galaxy. These were creatures who had been hoping never to see humans again. "Council Prime," Helen said carefully. "We sense that there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Perhaps you have us confused with another species." "Another species," repeated Vrexka, and the being's form seemed to shimmer with what might have been amusement. "Dr. Foster, your translation systems are working perfectly. Your genetic signatures match our records exactly. You are what your kind call human. What we call—" The ancient being paused as if saying the next words caused physical pain. "What we call the children of the grave world." Dr. Collins felt his hands begin to shake. "I don't understand." "What is a grave world?" "A world of death," said the insect-like being. "A place where only the strongest, most dangerous life can survive. A place that breeds killers." Admiral Kane looked around the chamber at the faces staring at them. Every expression showed the same emotion. Terror. "You're afraid of us," she said quietly. "Afraid?" Vrexka's form became brighter. "Admiral Kane, your species holds the record for the most systems quarantined, the most civilizations destroyed, and the most lives lost to a single species in galactic history." "That's impossible," Helen protested. "Humans have never left Earth before, haven't you?" asked Vrexka. "Or have you simply forgotten?" The Council Prime gestured, and the dome above them changed to show star charts. Red markers appeared on dozens of systems. Each red marker represents a system your ancestors visited, Vrexka explained. Each one is now either empty or under permanent quarantine. Susan stared at the map in horror. There were hundreds of red markers scattered across the galaxy. "This is some kind of mistake," Dr. Collins said weakly. "Humans aren't capable of this kind of destruction, aren't you?" asked the tree-like being. "Tell me, Dr. Collins, what is the average lifespan of most species in this chamber?" Peter looked confused. I don't know. 50 to 80 of your years," the being replied. "How long do humans live?" "About the same," Peter answered. "In perfect conditions," the being continued. "But humans can survive much longer under stress, can't they? And they can adapt to environments that would kill any of us within minutes." Helen began to realize what the alien was getting at. "You think we're some kind of super soldiers?" "Think?" laughed the blob creature. "We know what you are. The question is whether you've forgotten, or whether this is simply a new strategy." Admiral Kane looked around the chamber one more time, seeing the fear in every alien face. These beings represented advanced civilizations from across the galaxy, and they were all terrified of three humans who had come seeking friendship. "Council Prime," she said slowly, "I think we need to hear the whole story." Vrexka's form darkened. "Admiral, are you certain you want to learn what your species really is? Some knowledge once gained can never be forgotten." Susan looked at her companions, seeing her own determination reflected in their faces. They had come to space seeking answers about humanity's place in the universe. They were about to get those answers whether they wanted them or not. "Tell us everything," she said. The archives were hidden deep within the council station, in sections that required special permission to access. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez followed the nervous alien archivist through corridors that seemed older than human civilization itself. "I could lose my position for this," whispered Quinn 7, a slender being with too many joints and eyes that glowed in the dark. "But you deserve to know the truth about your own species." Professor Carl Henderson, the mission's historian, carried recording equipment as they walked. "Why are you helping us? Everyone else seems terrified of humans." "Because I was there," Quinn 7 replied quietly. "I was young when your people first came to our world. I saw what happened." They reached a massive door marked with symbols that seemed to shift and change when Amy looked at them directly. Quinn 7 placed several hands on different panels, and the door slowly opened to reveal a chamber filled with floating data crystals. "These are the restricted files," the archivist explained. "Everything the Council doesn't want the general population to know. Your species records take up an entire section." Carl stared at the thousands of crystals floating in neat rows. "All of these are about humans?" "These are just the major incidents," Quinn 7 said. "The complete records would fill a station this size." Amy approached the nearest crystal and watched as it activated at her touch, projecting a holographic display in the air. The image showed a star system she didn't recognize, with text scrolling beside it in an alien language. "Can you translate this?" she asked. Quinn 7 reluctantly moved closer. "It's a report from the Kellen system. Your people arrived there about 7,000 years ago. The Kellens were a peaceful species, traders who had built a civilization spanning 3 worlds. The display changed to show images of the Kellen people, tall, thin beings with 4 arms and gentle faces. Then the images shifted to show the same worlds, but now they were barren and lifeless. "What happened to them?" Carl asked, though he was beginning to fear the answer. "Your ancestors," Quinn 7 said quietly. "The humans arrived in ships that should not have been able to function. They were damaged, broken, but somehow still flew. The humans themselves were injured, dying. But they wouldn't stop." The display showed new images. Humans in primitive armor, fighting with weapons that seemed to be made from scrap metal and alien technology. But these weren't the humans Amy knew. These people looked harder, scarred, with eyes that showed no mercy. "The Kellens tried to help them," Quinn 7 continued. "They offered medical aid, food, shelter. The humans accepted everything, learned about Kellen technology and culture, and then..." The display showed the aftermath. Cities burned, ships destroyed, bodies scattered across once beautiful landscapes. "They killed everyone," Amy whispered. "Not everyone," Quinn 7 corrected. "That would have been mercy. They kept some alive to serve them. Others were used for experiments. The humans seemed fascinated by how other species worked, how they could be improved or modified." Carl moved to another crystal, his hands shaking as he activated it. This one showed a different system, but the story was similar. Humans arriving, being welcomed, and then destroying everything they touched. "How many systems?" he asked. "We stopped counting after 500, Quinn 7 replied. "But that was just in the first 1,000 years." Amy activated crystal after crystal, each one showing the same pattern. Humans would arrive at a world, sometimes as traders, sometimes as refugees, sometimes as explorers. They would be welcomed by the native species, and within a few years that species would be extinct. "But why?" Carl asked. "What did they want?" "Survival," Quinn 7 said simply. "Your ancestors came from a world so dangerous that they were shaped into perfect killers. They couldn't trust anyone, couldn't show weakness, couldn't stop fighting even when the fighting was over." One crystal showed images of early humans, and Amy gasped. These people didn't look entirely human. They were taller, stronger, with features that seemed designed for violence. Their eyes reflected light like an animal's, and their hands ended in claws. "They were different from us," she said. "Evolution," Quinn 7 explained. "Your homeworld, Graveworld Prime, changed them, made them into something that could survive anything." Carl found a crystal that made his blood run cold. It showed humans in what appeared to be a laboratory, working on captured aliens. The humans were modifying their prisoners, trying to understand how different species functioned. "They were experimenting on living beings," he said, feeling sick. "They wanted to understand what made other species weak," Quinn 7 replied. "Your ancestors believed that mercy was a disease that needed to be cured." Amy activated another crystal and found something that confused her. This one showed humans fighting other humans with the same brutality they showed aliens. "They fought each other too." "Constantly," Quinn 7 confirmed. Your species couldn't exist without conflict. When there were no aliens to fight, they turned on each other. Entire human colonies would destroy themselves in civil wars that lasted for generations. The archival records painted a picture of humanity that Amy couldn't reconcile with the people she knew. These ancient humans seemed more like monsters than people, spreading across the galaxy like a plague. What happened to them? Carl asked. Why did they disappear? No one knows for sure, Quinn 7 admitted. About 3,000 years ago, the attacks just stopped. Human ships stopped appearing. Systems that had been under human control went silent. We thought your species had finally destroyed itself. Amy found one final crystal that seemed different from the others. When she activated it, the display showed something unexpected. A human colony that seemed peaceful. The people looked more like modern humans working together to build cities and farms. This one's different, she said. Quinn 7 looked at the display, and his expression changed. Yes, the calm colonies. There were rumors near the end that some humans had started to change. They built settlements where they tried to live without violence. What happened to them? They were destroyed by other humans, Quinn 7 said sadly. Your warrior ancestors considered the peaceful colonies to be diseased, infected with weakness. They eliminated them to prevent the infection from spreading. Carl stared at the images of the destroyed peaceful colonies, trying to understand. So the violent humans killed the peaceful ones? Yes. Your species seemed determined to remain pure killers, free from any trace of mercy or compassion. Amy felt overwhelmed by everything they had learned. The humans in these records were nothing like the people she knew. Modern humans were capable of great kindness, love, and cooperation. They had built a peaceful civilization on Earth, but we're not like them, she said. Modern humans are different. Are you? Quinn 7 asked quietly. Or have you simply learned to hide it better? The question hung in the air as Amy and Carl looked at each other. They had come to the archives looking for answers about humanity's past. Instead, they had found a nightmare that made them question everything they thought they knew about their own species. We need to tell the others, Carl said finally. Yes, Amy agreed. But who's going to believe this? As they prepared to leave the archives, Quinn 7 stopped them one last time. There's something else you should know, the archivist said. The reason I'm helping you. My people weren't warriors. We were scientists, artists, philosophers. When the humans came to our world, I watched them kill my family. But before they died, my parents made me promise something. What? Amy asked. They made me promise that if humans ever returned, I would try to understand why they became monsters. They believed that no species is born evil, that something must have made your ancestors what they were. Quinn 7's eyes glowed brighter in the darkness. After studying your people for 3,000 years, I think I know what that something was. Your homeworld didn't just shape your ancestors into killers. It traumatized them so badly that they could never trust anyone, never show weakness, never stop fighting. Amy thought about Earth, beautiful and peaceful, with its blue oceans and green forests. It was hard to imagine it as a world that could create monsters. But Earth isn't like that now, she said, isn't it? Quinn 7 asked. Or have you simply forgotten what it really is? As they left the archives, Amy couldn't shake the feeling that they had only scratched the surface of humanity's dark past. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a terrible question was forming. What if the peaceful humans she knew were the exception, and the monsters in the records were the rule? Captain Jake Morrison stood before Council Prime Vrexka with the archival evidence in his hands. The data crystals felt heavier than they should have, weighted down by the terrible knowledge they contained. Council Prime, Jake said, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his mind. We've seen the records. We know what you think our ancestors did, but we need to understand why humanity has been painted as monsters across the galaxy. Vrexka's form shifted, becoming more solid and somehow more ancient. Captain Morrison, you speak as if these are merely accusations, but the evidence is not limited to our archives. Commander Patricia Lewis, the mission's historian, stepped forward. She had spent days studying the alien records, cross-referencing them with human history. Council Prime, our records show no evidence of space travel before our current mission. How do you explain this discrepancy? Your records, repeated the insect-like council member with what sounded like bitter amusement. Tell me, Commander Lewis, what is the oldest continuous human civilization on your world? Patricia frowned. That depends on how you define civilization. Written records go back about 5,000 years. And before that, oral traditions, archaeological evidence, but there are gaps. Gaps, Vrexka said, the word echoing in their minds. How convenient. Captain Morrison, allow me to fill in those gaps for you. The chamber around them changed, the walls becoming transparent to show the stars beyond. Then images began to appear in the space between them, holographic recordings that seemed to come from multiple sources. Your ancestors were not like you, Vrexka began. They were taller, stronger, faster. They could survive in environments that would kill you within minutes. They could adapt to different atmospheres, resist diseases that would devastate entire worlds, and regenerate from injuries that would be fatal to any other species. The images showed humans that barely looked human. They were giants compared to modern people, with pronounced muscle mass and features that seemed designed for violence. Their eyes reflected light in the darkness, and their movements had a predatory grace that was unsettling to watch. They were nearly immortal by our standards, continued another council member. A being that appeared to be made of living crystal, average lifespan of 800 years if they weren't killed in battle. And they were always in battle. Commander Lewis watched the images with growing horror. These people lived for 800 years? At minimum, the crystal being replied. Some of the ones we captured for study were over 1,000 years old. Captured? Jake felt his stomach turn. You captured humans? We tried everything to understand them, Vrexka admitted. Diplomacy, trade, appeasement, alliance. Nothing worked. So yes, we occasionally managed to capture one for study. More images appeared, showing laboratories where humans were being examined by various alien species. The humans in these images looked defiant even in captivity, their eyes burning with unquenchable rage. What did you learn? Patricia asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. That they were perfect killing machines, said a gas-like being whose voice sounded like wind through dead leaves. Their bodies were designed for violence. Enhanced reflexes, redundant organs, bones that were denser than most metals. But the truly terrifying part wasn't their bodies. What was it? Jake asked. Their minds, Vrexka replied. Your ancestors were incapable of trust, incapable of mercy, incapable of peace. They saw every other living being as either prey or competition. The images changed to show human settlements on alien worlds. But these weren't the peaceful colonies Jake had expected. They were military installations, heavily fortified and surrounded by the bones of previous inhabitants. They turned every world they touched into a training ground, the crystal being explained. They would arrive on a planet, study the native species, and then hunt them to extinction for sport and practice. Patricia stared at the images in disbelief. This can't be real. Humans aren't capable of this level of systematic cruelty, aren't they? Vrexka asked. Commander Lewis, what happened to the large predators on your homeworld? The species that might have threatened early human development. They went extinct, Patricia said slowly, mostly due to human expansion and hunting. All of them? Patricia felt a chill run down her spine. Most of them. The dangerous ones. Your ancestors didn't just drive them extinct, said the gas being. They hunted them deliberately, systematically eliminating anything that could threaten human dominance. Your homeworld was once populated by creatures that could challenge humanity. None of them survived. Jake looked at the images of ancient humans and tried to find some resemblance to the people he knew. But modern humans aren't like this. We're capable of compassion, cooperation, love. Are you? Vrexka's form brightened. Or have you simply learned to disguise your true nature? That's not fair, Jake protested. You're judging us based on people who lived thousands of years ago. 3,000 years, the crystal being corrected. Not very long in galactic terms. And Captain Morrison, we have evidence that suggests your peaceful nature may not be as genuine as you believe. New images appeared, these ones showing Earth from space. The planet looked beautiful, blue and green and alive, but the alien technology was revealing things that human eyes couldn't see. Your world is covered in the bones of extinct species, Vrexka explained, layer upon layer of creatures that once lived there, and most of them died very recently in cosmic terms. Patricia studied the images, her expertise in history helping her understand what she was seeing, the mass extinctions. But those were natural events, were they? Asked the gas being. Or were they the result of your ancestors systematically eliminating potential threats? The evidence was overwhelming. Image after image showed Earth's history from an alien perspective. revealing patterns of extinction that followed human expansion across the planet. Your ancestors didn't just conquer other worlds, Rexka continued. They turned their own homeworld into a graveyard first. That's why we call it Graveworld Prime. It's a monument to your species' capacity for destruction. Jake felt the weight of this revelation pressing down on him. But if this is all true, what happened to those humans? Why are we different? That, said Vrexka, is the question that terrifies us most. The chamber fell silent as the aliens exchanged glances. Finally, the ancient being continued. About 3,000 years ago, your ancestors simply disappeared. Ships stopped arriving from your homeworld. Human colonies went silent. We thought your species had finally destroyed itself. But we didn't, Patricia said. We survived and evolved. Did you evolve? The crystal being asked. Or did you simply learn to hide your true nature until you were strong enough to resume your expansion? Jake looked around at the alien faces staring at them. Every expression showed the same mixture of fear and suspicion. You think this is all an act, he realized. You think we're pretending to be peaceful? Captain Morrison, Vrexka said, his form becoming darker and more imposing. Your species once controlled a third of the galaxy. You had the technology to travel between stars when most of us were still learning to build simple tools. Then you vanished for 3 millennia, only to return claiming to be peaceful explorers making their first journey into space. The ancient being leaned forward, his voice becoming more intense. Either your species suffered a catastrophic loss of memory and technology, becoming primitive and peaceful by accident, or this is the most sophisticated deception in galactic history. Jake felt the full weight of the galaxy's fear and suspicion crushing down on him. They had come to space seeking friendship and discovery. Instead, they had found a universe that remembered humanity as monsters and was terrified that the monsters had returned. What happens now? He asked quietly. Rexka's form shifted one final time, becoming solid and implacable. Now, Captain Morrison, you and your people face a choice. You can return to your homeworld and accept permanent isolation from the galaxy, or you can face the combined military might of every species in this chamber. The ultimatum hung in the air like a death sentence. Jake looked at his companions, seeing his own despair reflected in their faces. They had come to the stars seeking humanity's future. Instead, they had found humanity's past, and that past was too terrible to overcome. How long do we have to decide? Patricia asked. You have until your ship's communication array can contact your homeworld, Vrexka replied. Once Earth knows about our existence, this choice will be made for you. As the session ended and the humans were escorted back to their ship, Jake couldn't help but wonder, what if the aliens were right? What if humanity's peaceful nature was just a temporary phase, and the monsters from the archives were still lurking somewhere deep in human DNA, waiting for the right moment to return? The emergency session in the White House had been going for 6 hours. President Nancy Williams sat at the head of the table, surrounded by the world's most powerful leaders, all connected through secure video links. The report from the horizon had shaken every government on Earth. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, said President Williams, looking at the data on her screen. Our exploration team has made contact with a galactic civilization that knows about Earth, but they think we're monsters who once controlled a third of the galaxy. General Steve Parker, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, leaned forward. Madam President, the evidence they've sent back is disturbing. According to these alien records, humans were some kind of super soldiers who systematically destroyed hundreds of civilizations. Secretary of State Kate Morgan shook her head. But that's impossible. Human civilization is only a few thousand years old. We have no records of space travel or galactic conquest. That's what worries me, said Dr. Alan Price, the government's chief scientific advisor. I've been studying the genetic data the aliens provided. Modern humans show signs of recent evolutionary changes. Rapid changes. President Williams felt a chill. What kind of changes? Reduced aggression, increased empathy, smaller physical stature, shorter lifespans, Dr. Price explained. It's as if someone or something deliberately bred the violence out of our species. On the screen, the British Prime Minister spoke up. Dr. Price, are you suggesting that the peaceful humans we know today are somehow artificial? Not artificial, Dr. Price replied carefully, but possibly the result of selective pressure that favored peaceful traits over aggressive ones. General Parker pulled up his own data. I've had our people analyzing human military history. When you look at the patterns, there's something disturbing. Every time humans develop weapons capable of mass destruction, we seem to step back from using them. That's called wisdom, Kate Morgan pointed out. Is it? Parker asked. Or is it something else? Look at nuclear weapons. We developed them, used them twice, and then spent decades avoiding their use even when it would have been strategically advantageous. President Williams studied the faces on her screen. What are you suggesting, General? I'm suggesting that maybe the aliens are right to be afraid, Parker said quietly. Maybe we really are descended from monsters and our peaceful nature is just a temporary evolutionary phase. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this possibility. Finally, the Chinese premier spoke. The question is not whether our ancestors were monsters. The question is what we do now. Tony Marshall, leader of the Global Peace Coalition, had been listening quietly. Now he stood up and activated his presentation. I've been studying the alien archives, he said, and I think there's something the Council isn't telling us. Look at these records carefully. The screens around the room displayed images from the alien archives. Tony highlighted specific details that others had missed. The humans in these records aren't just violent, he explained. They're desperate. Look at their equipment, improvised, cobbled together from alien technology. Look at their settlements. Defensive, isolated, constantly under attack. Dr. Price leaned forward. What are you saying? I'm saying our ancestors weren't conquerors, Tony replied. They were refugees. Something drove them from Earth, something so terrible that they became willing to do anything to survive. Kate Morgan studied the images with new eyes. You think they were running from something? I think they were traumatized, Tony said. Look at their behavior patterns. They never stayed in one place long. They never trusted anyone. They destroyed potential threats before those threats could destroy them. President Williams felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together. You're suggesting that our ancestors left Earth because of some catastrophe, and their experiences in space turned them into the monsters the galaxy remembers. Exactly, Tony agreed. And when they disappeared 3,000 years ago, it's because the survivors finally found their way home. Dr. Price pulled up his genetic analysis again. That would explain the rapid evolutionary changes. If the returning humans carried trauma-induced genetic modifications, natural selection would favor traits that helped them survive on a peaceful Earth. The violent genes would be selected against, Kate realized. Over time, humans would become naturally more peaceful. General Parker wasn't convinced. But what about the aliens' ultimatum? They want us to choose between isolation and war. President Williams looked around the room at the faces of Earth's leaders. What do you all think? The debate that followed lasted hours. Some argued for accepting isolation, building a peaceful civilization cut off from the galaxy. Others insisted that humanity had the right to prove they had changed. Finally, Captain Jake Morrison's voice came through on the communication link from the horizon. Mr. President, I have a proposal. Go ahead, Captain. What if we don't choose between isolation and integration? What if we do both? President Williams frowned. I don't understand. Some humans return to Earth, Jake explained. They build a peaceful civilization in voluntary isolation, proving that we can live without violence. Meanwhile, others stay in galactic space as ambassadors, slowly demonstrating that humanity has evolved. Dr. Price nodded thoughtfully. It's actually brilliant. We prove our evolution through two separate experiments. But who stays and who goes? Kate asked. Volunteers, Jake replied. People who are willing to live their entire lives as proof that humanity has changed. Tony Marshall stepped forward. I'll stay. I've dedicated my life to promoting peace. I can't think of a better way to continue that work. One by one, other voices spoke up. Scientists, diplomats, teachers, artists, people who believed in humanity's capacity for growth and change. President Williams felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. This is the most important choice in human history. No, said Dr. Price quietly. The most important choice was made 3,000 years ago, when our ancestors decided to come home and try to heal from their trauma. The final vote was unanimous. Humanity would split. Some would return to Earth to build a peaceful civilization in voluntary isolation. Others would remain in galactic space as living proof of humanity's evolution. As the session ended, President Williams addressed the galaxy through the communication link. To the Galactic Council, she said, humanity accepts responsibility for the actions of our ancestors. We cannot undo the damage they caused, but we can prove that we have grown beyond their violence. On the horizon, Captain Morrison watched as the alien ships surrounding them began to power down their weapons. It wasn't acceptance, not yet. But it was hope. Admiral Susan Kane spoke to the assembled council. We understand your fear. Our ancestors were monsters, but we are not our ancestors. Give us the chance to prove that evolution is possible. Council Prime Brexka's ancient form shifted, becoming slightly less intimidating. This proposal is unprecedented. No species has ever voluntarily divided itself to prove its worthiness. Then we'll be the first, Susan replied. Months later, as half of humanity prepared to return to Earth, while the other half took up residence on the council station, Jake Morrison stood in the observation deck watching both groups say their goodbyes. Dr. Lisa Warren joined him at the window. Do you think this will work? I don't know, Jake admitted. But I think our ancestors would be proud. They survived impossible odds to get us this far. Now it's our turn to survive impossible expectations. Below them, humans and aliens worked together for the first time in galactic history. It would take generations to build trust. Some species might never forgive humanity for its past, but for the first time in 3,000 years, the galaxy wasn't silent with terror when it heard Earth's true name. The children of Graveworld Prime had come home changed, and now they would prove to the universe that monsters could evolve into something better. The galaxy watched nervously, but it watched, and that was enough for now. In the end, the most human thing of all was the willingness to split apart in order to prove they could come together. The species that had once conquered through violence had learned to conquer through sacrifice, choosing to divide themselves rather than divide the galaxy. Whether it would work remained to be seen. But as Jake watched the first human-alien research team begin their work together, he felt something his ancestors had never known, hope for a future built on trust instead of fear. The galaxy had learned Earth's true name and gone silent in terror, but perhaps in time, they would learn humanity's new name and go silent in wonder instead.